What is up, guys? Eric here from Real Film Reviews, bringing you another movie review, this time for the new Star Wars story, Solo. Solo is directed by Ron Howard, stars Alden Ehrenreich, Emilia Clarke, Woody Harrelson, and Paul Bettany. This film is basically the origin story film for Han Solo. This is the second Star Wars story film that's been made. The first one was, of course, Rogue One, and this one has decided to focus in on a character that we actually do know and love from the different trilogies that have been made. So instead of Rogue One, where it was sort of a full-on spin-off, this one is a prequel of a specific character. We get to see where Han Solo comes from, when he first met Lando Calrissian, where he found the Millennium Falcon. You get to see all these different little things that are fun tidbits about the character of Han Solo, along with sort of learning more in-depth things about who the character is himself. Now, as a lot of people know, this film went through a lot of production troubles, losing directors and writers, and all kinds of different things were happening during the making of this film, so it didn't really have that big of a chance to be amazing when it came out in many people's minds. I think that that's sort of what we're seeing in the fact that a lot of people aren't having an open mind when seeing this movie. They're just immediately throwing it away and saying that it's trash, but I think that this movie does have some merit. While it's not perfect, there's some good and there's some bad, like there is with most things in this world. For one thing, even though this movie went through a lot of production troubles, Ron Howard made a beautiful looking movie. This movie is wonderfully directed, on par with like a actual Star Wars film, not just a Star Wars story. I think this movie is gorgeous. The lighting throughout the film looks so great. It utilizes lighting in a way that I feel like Star Wars rarely ever does, which is to sort of tell the mood and sort of the scenario that the characters are in just through what we're visually seeing. Along with that, rather than relying fully on CGI and just computer animated characters, this movie has so much puppetry and practical effects strewn throughout it, which I really loved. The fact that there are so few aliens in this film that are just CGI and it's actual makeup or puppetry is wonderful, because that's something that the Star Wars series really needs. And this one might be a little bit of a weird one, but the action in this movie is really good, and I think it was so enjoyable because in every single Star Wars movie, including Rogue One, Jedis and lightsabers and those things play such an important role, even though when you think about the general galaxy in the sense of Star Wars, there are so few Jedis and so few people that are Force sensitive that it's kind of weird that we almost always have a character in that sense in the film, and this one doesn't. This one relies upon characters that just use blasters, and we get really awesome firefights throughout the film because of that, and I really think that that added to the film, because one specific character, Woody Harrelson's character, who I really enjoyed, and I really liked Woody Harrelson in this film, feels kind of like this old school gunslinger that you would see in like an old western, who's sort of like knowing that he's nearing his end and he's wanting to teach a younger person, that being Han Solo, about sort of the ways of this like criminal underworld that they're involved in. And I really loved that, and I thought it worked so well to sort of try to paint this movie like a western, because Han Solo fits very well as a gunslinger type character. Obviously, Donald Glover also does a phenomenal job in this movie as Lando Calrissian. He has so much charisma and so much energy in every single scene. He is so good, and I think that that's the one thing everyone knew we were gonna get when we watched this, because it was just like, obviously, it's Donald Glover, he's so talented, and from just the way he looked, he fully embodied that character, and I thought he was absolutely wonderful in every scene, and I can't wait to see more. Emilia Clarke did a pretty good job throughout the film. I do have some issues with her character, but those end more as being issues with the script rather than her performance, because I do think she did a very good job in the movie. And then I think along with that, Alden Ehrenreich is in sort of the same boat as Han Solo. I thought that he did a very admirable and good job that was enough to feel like Han Solo without feeling like he was just supposed to be doing an impression of Harrison Ford. I didn't want that. I didn't want someone just to do a Harrison Ford impression. I wanted someone who embodied what Han Solo's supposed to be and maybe captured some of those mannerisms and things, but wasn't just someone trying to be Harrison Ford. And I think that he did that very well. And then the movie's also paced very well. I thought that it worked really well. There was consistent action, there was consistent story building, there was very rarely a moment that was very boring. And I think that that's a big thing that you need, because I think that was a major issue with Rogue One. And I think this movie sort of moved past that. There was constantly action or story progression that was going on, and I was rarely bored in the film. However, that being said, really the only issue that I have with this film is the script, and there's multiple things that the script does incorrect in my eyes and sort of mess messes up this movie in ways, because I think that in terms of acting, visuals, all of that stuff, this movie nails it. It does a great job in all those things, but then the script somehow misses so many of its marks in different categories. For one thing, this is Han Solo. He's a somewhat lighthearted, fun character, and yet this movie's comedy really missed its mark for most of the film. While I enjoyed a few of the jokes and I definitely laughed and had a good time, I really just felt like the comedy was missing its mark most of the time. There were a lot of jokes that I knew I was supposed to be laughing at that just didn't even sort of make me laugh. The story is also very surface level. While we get a lot of fun Easter eggs and like little references to things that we know about the Star Wars universe, which is obviously always cool when you get those things, overall this story is very one-dimensional. There's not any extra depth to it. There's nothing that crazy. The villain that's supposed to be in the movie is very absent for most of the film, yet he's supposed to be the big bad in the film, and it's kind of hard to see that because he's so rarely in the movie. And then it just sort of felt like this script was just supposed to hit a few marks of like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we included this thing and this thing and this thing, and then they just sort of melded a story out of that, where I wish it would have felt more like a natural story. Because there are aspects of this movie in terms of its story that work, but I think they just needed more depth overall. The characters are 50-50, like I said. I enjoyed Emilia Clarke's performance, even though I think her character was a little bland. I think there are definitely other characters in the script that fall into that same category. Like I said, the villain, there's a specific droid character that they just kind of feel bland, and they don't really fit anywhere specifically in the movie. They're just kind of there, which I think was definitely a weakness of the film. However, despite those other things, I think the two big issues with this movie's script kind of revolve around the same thing, and it's that, for one, this movie kind of just feels like a fun space adventure film that takes place in the Star Wars universe. While there are characters we recognize, there's Han, there's Chewie, there's Lando, and those characters are fun to see on screen, the overarching story and the progression of the characters doesn't really feel attached to anything else. And I think that that's a big issue, because these characters, especially Han and Chewie, are so pivotal in the Star Wars universe that it's kind of odd that they feel so like unrealized in this film. And I think that it just sort of felt like, while I was watching this film and enjoy it, and there are scenes that feel like Star Wars scenes full of characters we love, there are also a lot of scenes that just feel like a very generic space adventure film. And while those scenes didn't necessarily fall flat, they just sort of felt very bland in the sequences that they were placed in, because even though these characters that are very important were there, it didn't really make it carry any more weight in these sort of generic space adventure scenes that we got. And then I think by far the issue most people are having is, while Alden Ehrenreich did a very good job in this film, I think he did an extremely admirable job. I very much enjoyed his performance, and I think, like I said, he found that balance between doing an impression of Harrison Ford and making a character that just feels like Han Solo. The movie's script doesn't really paint this character consistently as the Han Solo that we know and love. The Han Solo of the original trilogy, the Han Solo of The Force Awakens, this Han Solo feels less like that scoundrel anti-hero that we kind of know and love, and more like this guy who's just kind of doing whatever it takes to get by, but is still sort of not really what you expect Han Solo to be. And I think that that's kind of hard to describe without getting into spoilers, but I feel like if you watch the film, you'll realize there are some scenes that nail it. You watch it and you're like, hell yeah, that's Han Solo. That is a perfect scene that feels exactly like what I want out of a Han Solo film. But then there's other scenes where it's like, that sort of works, I guess, for this movie, but when you look at it in the grand scheme of the character, it's like, this feels very out of place for what we already know about Han Solo going into this film. And like I said, I can't really get into this stuff without spoilers, so I don't want to go too in-depth. The main thing is I feel like there are some scenes that really nailed Han Solo, and there were some scenes that I felt maybe were a little off-brand for Han Solo. Well, I think as a whole, it's pretty much like, pretty good, average, and then there's a few specific ones that are like, ugh, like you guys kind of messed that up there. I'm gonna give Solo a B-. I don't really understand why this movie's getting so much hate. Obviously, there are things about the film that could have been done better or improved, but I think overall it was a fun Star Wars movie. Like, I had a good time watching it. The action was fun. There was some decent comedy. The performances were fun. It introduced characters that I liked, and we got some fun little Easter eggs. And while there's always going to be problems with the film, and while this one specifically, I think turned out a lot better than it should have given all of the problems it had in production, and I liked this movie more than I liked Rogue One, definitely, like, no comparison. It's just kind of one of those things where I think you need to give it a chance, but go in with an open mind. I think too many people are walking into this movie wanting to dislike it, where I think you need to walk in with little to no expectations, and you'll end up with just a fun summer action movie that takes place in the Star Wars universe where you get some fun Han Solo, Lando, Chewie stuff, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Well guys, as always, I'm Eric. If you enjoyed this review, please do like, subscribe, comment down below what you thought of Solo, share everything we do here on Real Film Reviews, and hope to see you guys later.